Thank you for coming. I am Karen Snyder, aka Kiss Around, transmedia producer. And joining me today is Sam Barlow, the producer and director of Her Story. And he actually, his history includes being a writer and designer of two British Silent Hill games, as well as Shattered Memories. And he's a former game director at Climax Studios in the UK. So his title, Her Story, is actually up for a ton of awards and just won an incredible amount at Game Developers' Choice Awards. Her Story won Best Narrative, Best Handheld Mobile, Innovation. In fact, you walked out with 8 awards total.
Yeah.
And so, indeed. Now, Simon Tremblay, who has over 15 years of production experience in video game and media industries. Alas, this does not look like Simon over here, does it? Simon had a medical emergency. He will not be able to join us today. So, my daughter, aka Ink Rose, she has graciously come out to assist. She has almost 100,000 followers on YouTube and is very vested in the video game community in a variety of ways, as well as being an illustrator and voiceover artist. So, she will take on the voice of Simon, but Simon will join us in one way, virtually.
Hi everybody, my name is Simon Tremblay. I'm the co-founder of Zendel Media and the creator of Missing an Interactive Trailer. I'm really sorry I couldn't make it today, but Karen and Sam were kind enough to give me some spotlight and give you this intro. So in short, I'm a 3D trained artist. I started my career in the VFX industry and jumped into the game industry. I did most of my career at Ubisoft Montreal, where I work on Splinter Cell, Prince of Persia, and Assassin's Creed. The idea of Missing, or the idea of starting a company, started from me being tired to see bad games made of great TV shows. All these games are, whether they are shooters or cartoony games, that have nothing to do with the great quality of the TV episode. So my goal with this was to try to find a great a new product that would bring the two together, where you have the high production values and the intense narrative of a TV episode mixed with the engaging experience of being the hero in a video game. So we wanted to bring this together in a seamless experience where when you start the game, it feels like a TV episode, and all the way through, you never get out of the visual. So these were the premises. We need to tackle some technological issue with this. I think we did a good job to come up with the first story. So now our goal today is to find a producer who might be interested in working with us to make games attached to their TV series. I think it could make for a great experience. So that's it. So enjoy the panel, and if you have questions, I'm sure you can find my info in the booklet, or reach me on LinkedIn. Like, you can find me easily. So have a great panel.
We will, yes. So, first off is, what are full motion video games? This is still very much a niche at this point, but a niche that is obviously expanding and gaining in a variety of ways as the producers of these games. The basic description of what makes a full motion game is that we are adding in live action video. Generally, we are replacing 2D, 3D cutscenes, but at some titles they actually still merge these elements, but the meshing between a live narrative into having some type of interactive video game mechanics is what defines full motion video game. So all of our particular titles here today have that special feature, and specifically for us, we all did choose to incorporate actors in our narratives. And in some cases, there are certain things, such as that I'm working on right now, that are actually more serious use purpose, which I'm kind of calling reality simulation, which you're mixing in, but that was still the concept of video inside a video game, but for more of a serious training use. So while many FMVs have a way of presenting information through cutscenes, the games are primarily presented or referred to in this manner. Now, Her Story is a standalone game title. While Missing an Interactive Thriller, Simon's game is part of a series, and the Elements Co. Unity Match, my game, is actually part of a transmedia franchise. And some people are not really familiar with the term transmedia, but it basically means a story told over at least 3 different media with new content not repurposed. And you often see this as an example of Sci-Fi's Defiance project, where you watch the TV show, and then they extended the story into the video game, and then they had additional books. And if you really wanted the entire story, you had to go through all of them, because there are certain things you'd only find in the books. You'd never see in the other two media, or vice versa. And you also see that as an example with Walking Dead even. Walking Dead did that same principle, where you wanted to extend the story arc, you wanted to be found and reach or be retained there. They had different media offerings. So we're going to go through and watch our trailers here so you can see the principles that we're putting into place when it comes to mixing interactive with video.
This is the third day running you've called me in. Hurt someone? You think it's murder? I'd like to speak to a lawyer now. Please. You have no murder weapon. You have nothing. And all these stories we've been telling each other. Just that. Stories.
We enjoyed playing that actually all the way through. It took us about 3 hours to get that. Anastasia, do you have any specific highlights of the game you enjoyed most?
Mostly figuring out the mystery itself. I'm not going to spoil anything, but piecing together everything from all the information given from the little cutscenes was very fun to figure everything out.
So the interactive in this particular instance is, you call it non-linear, but at the same time, it does have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and the way you crafted it.
Yeah, essentially there was a brilliant, when I was researching this game, there was a brilliant introduction by J.G. Ballard to one of his books where he talks about suggesting that readers, rather than read the pages in order, they kind of flick through, and if they see words that they like or phrases that stick out, then they kind of just drop in, read a little bit, and kind of navigate this book in that way. And this was kind of an interactive version of that. So yeah, there's kind of a chronological ordering to the database, but yeah, you search this thing by typing in words, and if the woman who's being interviewed by the police speaks those words, then you can pull up those clips. So you can pick up on threads, themes, names of characters, pieces of evidence, and you can kind of use that to weave your own way through the story.
And that's actually part of the fun, because we were sitting there, because we actually played it through together, like, okay, which word have we not used? Okay, all the numbers 1 through 10. You're just going through this whole what and how and where could I search, because I'm missing that one video file in my database of story exploration. Our next trailer is Simon's game, Missing, an interactive thriller. Very dramatic. He went for a very fun twist on the thriller type of feel, and in terms of the gameplay, in this particular instance, he really sought, as you heard earlier, to mix that sense of cinematography, television essence into puzzlers. So you're able to go through and get this guy and help him as the chief navigator of the story. So he actually has over 45 minutes of footage here, along with the live, the solving puzzles, the hidden objects, and you have to use evading capture and more, which he enjoyed in terms of shooting, which we'll get to in a little bit later. And then there comes my title. Now, romance is a 1.6 billion industry, but in the US in particular, it's mostly been just video games. So the #1 mobile player and on mobile tablet is actually women ages 35 to 54. The video game industry has greatly expanded. So I sat there going, you know what? I actually never used to read romance because I always thought, okay, it's old women who smoke, but it actually isn't. It's extremely diverse, and it took me reading through about 154 titles when I started this project after I saw, wow, romance is the #1 ebook seller, and women are out there playing. Well, is there a way we can have fun and merge it together, and especially from the standpoint of a story arc? And since I like to have fun, I have a very tongue-in-cheek manner of doing things.
Only in the Elements Club Unity Match video game can you help cultivate a love match.
Do tell!
Stir up the romance and unite two souls by mixing and unleashing chemical bonds. Over 55 minutes of live-action cutscenes, of engaging audio, 250 levels filled with challenge, excitement, action, and lust.
God, I love new technology.
Slightly different than our two male counterparts, but you know what? We're having fun with it. So, when it comes to how and why we are utilizing live action within a given video game, we each kind of have a different take on this as producers and creators. We are obviously utilizing pre-rendered videos in place of real-time graphics, but there's generally a specific reason we're doing it. So we didn't just sit there at the end of the day and go, hey, let's do video, right? No, yes, So in regards to the Elements Club, I chose to use live actors primarily because I was doing a romance. When you don't have a bazillion-dollar budget and you're not a console game, there's no way you're going to get high-quality 3D graphics that could anyway have the emotion especially needed in face or the character of that particular entity. So I sat there going, well, and I hate 2D, okay? There's a few quote-unquote romance games that have been out there, generally like hidden object types, but they had like 2D and a really, really lame story, and you're just sitting there going, okay, that's a cardboard cutout of a prince. There was just no sense of a deeper connection. So that is particularly why I chose, you know what, within budget, this is a transmedia, I'm already shooting, let me see how I can possibly leverage this particular sense of connection into the story play on the game side.
You can't exactly play The Last of Us on an iPad.
No, you cannot, in terms of the graphic quality. So Sam, what are your thoughts in regarding to why you chose video?
So when I started making Her Story, or at least at the very beginning, I didn't even have an idea of what it was going to be. I was just focused on, I'm going to make this game. And I wanted to do like a police procedural game. That's been something I've been wanting to do for a long time. And I kind of narrowed it down and said, this is going to be about the police interview, because that felt like a good indie thing to do. I was narrowing the scope, but also focusing kind of deep on character. And as part of that process, I did months and months of research, reading all the police manuals, looking into case files and things. And as part of that, I watched tens of hours of video, because YouTube now, you can watch real-life police interrogations, this kind of thing where they just release it into the public. And it's a very strange thing that you have these very intimate, personal interviews, and there's the YouTube audience there watching them and commenting and stuff. And so kind of out of immersing myself in that, the idea came to me that to react to that, maybe the game could use video, and it could be a game focused around video. And that got me really excited, because when I'd gone from making these kind of bigger budget console games and decided to do an indie game, the thing I really was going to miss was working with performers. Because when I was working on these big budget games, we did all this extensive performance capture and motion capture, working with great performers, and I was kind of worried about leaving that behind. How do I tell my story similarly to you? How am I going to get this emotional connection across? So when I had the idea of the video and trying to make it look like it was this authentic police video, that was exciting to me, because now not only could I incorporate performance in the game, but actually the game could revolve around it. And it's very important to me that when it comes to writing, that there's a big emphasis on subtext. And that's very hard, next to impossible, to communicate, even with really high-end CGI. You just can't quite get that level of performance. So
right, and the way her voice, her nuances, the subtleties you put in there, I saw that. As a fellow creative, you're like, she's adding in what was needed, especially for the story arc and the mystery elements he put in there. It was very, very well crafted. We enjoyed the writing very much. Anastasia, could you highlight some of Simon's thoughts in regards?
Well, Simon said, in our case, the question is the opposite. Why did we add gameplay to a TV show? That was really the starting point. Back in 2008, I was still working at Ubisoft. Convergence was the trending buzzword at the time. We were trying to work closely with the film industry to offer better licensed production, but in the end, the film industry kept making bad game movies and the game industry kept making bad movie tie-ins. At the same time, I was looking at the amazing production values of some TV shows. I was wondering if turning them into bad shooters or bubblehead Facebook games was the only way. So much was lost in the transition. There had to be something else. After a jump at EA for 2 years, I quit and co-founded Xandal Media with the goal to tackle this problem, both creatively and technologically. To create an experience that felt like a TV episode, 2 things had to be solved. 1, the transitions between video and gameplay would have to be seamless, and 2, the player would have to interact in the same visual world as the actors. We're proud to have achieved that with Missing. When the game came out in November 2014, the feedback was unanimous. It's unique, it looks great, but it's too short. We now know that we can make more productions like this.
So when you add in video and you're heading towards the concept of an FMV game, well, your production flow absolutely does change. And in terms of creative scope or how you're vesting that particular on-camera talent. So we're moving away from a visually scripted experience and you're adding in the game mechanics. And there's a lot of specifics that generally are just not dealt with when you're doing 2D, 3D game. Well, first off, now you suddenly have to have a film crew. You have to have a layered script. You have to have props. You have to have locations. It's an enhancement in one way, but there's also the dovetail of you really do have to plan in terms of where you're taking that. You got to keep your shooting days tight. So Sam and Simon each have their own spin on why they focus there, but do you have any highlights, Sam, in terms of why you crafted towards that particular style of game production?
I think the thing that gets me excited, and like I say, when I started doing this was my first independent game, and the thing that was really important to me was that I didn't want to create a compromised experience. So it would have been very easy for me to kind of keep making the kind of games I've been doing, but on a much lower budget, and so trying to root around for an art style that would excuse that or kind of come up with compromises. But the thing with Her Story was that once I had that idea, it felt like I could execute this fully. There was no compromise. And the use of video, if you think of like the movie industry, you think of TV, there's such a range of budgets, and you have the independents, and you have the kind of super low budget horror films. And so you get this lovely kind of range of creativity and ability of people to come up with creative solutions. And I think there's something magical about shooting video or film that I think potentially can be leveraged to allow independent game creators to actually start exploring that kind of larger remit of different genres and things.
Agreed. Simon's highlights on this, Anastasia?
TV series haven't changed much since their creation. Yes, it moved from broadcast to cable, and now it's going OTT. But the experience of watching an hour-long episode hasn't changed. HBO and Showtime are following in the footsteps of Netflix and are becoming available on every device. This creates an opportunity for live-action producers to explore new territories. They can now create their own games from almost the same production pipeline, allowing for a continuous visual experience across different mediums. We believe that this is a new place, that there is a place for new medium that sits between games and TV, and we want to be part of defining this new medium.
And of course, as an audience, our hope is that what we and how we are doing it really does work. And your comments, I know, definitely have helped me to source out as a producer and creator what's working and what's not, what could we do better. I'm sure you have the same experience. But some of the things that we had to encounter in terms of the production side of things. The good thing with being in India, of course, that as just Simon just said, we get to try things. The standard industries just isn't going to push, but we have the ability or flexibility to do that, although we do face the constraints of time, budget, and talent. So with the Elements Club Unity match, in terms of a production style, my particular game had a lot more in that I was shooting with a cast of over 12 to 8 to 18 extras, dependent on the scene. We had a crew of 10. The aspect of having it historical obviously adds an immediate layer of you have to have the right locations, you have to have all historic props, you have to have costumes. Most of these costumes are handcrafted, utilizing patterns historic to the time. Women in particular care about this, by the way, guys. I know this is a shock to you, but they like that thing. So I knew costumes would be very important for my particular target audience. But of course, As well, when we were shooting, we actually shot at Heritage Square Museum in Los Angeles, which was an honor because they'd never actually allowed anyone inside their antique furnished rooms because we're basically stepping on a set of 10 million antiques. But being an indie actually really assisted us because they said, you're a small crew, you're not Disney. Disney got to shoot exteriors for Saving Mr. Banks, but they weren't allowed inside because they just can't handle that sense of small scale rooms. These are authentic. So we had the ability to leverage that element, and in terms of tool sets, some of the things that we really had to be aware of is how we're going to shoot this. I chose to shoot on DSLR primarily because everything in the series was heading towards mobile and #1. So shooting on a RED, there's just no value to it. This isn't a movie. I'm actually having to collapse the files as much as possible just to keep file size low. That's a consideration that just wasn't needed. So some of the tools I really leveraged was Adobe Story, and in terms of scripting as well as scheduling. I really valued having a quality production assistant because you have to handle a lot when you're heading up shooting days, and having that assistant is extremely valuable. And the way we shot is we actually did a lot of the footage as a 3-camera TV show rather than more of a lot of special shot setups for a movie experience. And that was just because I had only a finite set of time. So you have to think in terms of shooting out something that normally in 2D, 3D, hey, you can reset your camera any way you want, as many times as you want, as long as, it's fitting to that particular need or that cutscene. Can't do that here. You got to pre-think everything and shoot it. Sam, what are some of the thoughts that you encountered in regards to your particular production flow?
It was interesting because, I think with her story, like I say, coming at it with the mindset of being super economical and super indie, the premise really lent itself to that. So we only needed a single location, we had a single actress, and then beautifully for me, there was not a huge amount of camera work. So each had one camera, they never had to move. But even then, we had a similar thing to you where actually the quality of the video that was coming out was too high, especially because this was supposed to look like it was from 1994.
Right.
So I had a setup where I actually took all the HD video and piped it through 2 old VCR players, kind of looped it around a couple of times on some old tapes and then back into the computer so that it had the authentic look. And then the really weird, ironic thing that I then had was I had to go for a really high value of compression on the movie files because all the noise and grain that was in that kind of crappy looking VHS stuff would disappear if I started compressing it too much.
Right, and your sound really does enhance the experience you're putting together, the sound design. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, there's so much. It's such a weird thing to try and make things authentically crappy, but then also kind of listenable again. So you're trying to, dumb down the audio and make it sound like it's just happening in a police studio. I mean, one of the things that happened early on was originally, if you look at a lot of the these real-life interrogation tapes, the camera's usually quite high up, so you can see everyone involved, and if a police officer gets physical or something, then that's recorded. But whilst we were rehearsing and we were playing around with different places for the camera, it really felt that actually dropping the camera down, having it face Viva, really kind of changed the way it felt. And there's a thing with her story where it almost feels like, although it has this very strange abstracted structure, it almost feels like you're in dialogue with Viva's character, and having the camera sit there kind of really built that kind of empathy in that relationship.
Yeah, agreed. The camera angle fit for that particular usage. Anastasia, what are some of Simon's highlights in terms of production flow?
His first tip is to hire experts. So many things can go wrong on a set. I may have a lot of experience leading AAA games, but I had no clue on where to start when shooting a script. It was already my first attempt at writing and creative directing. I was not going to play a film director on top of that. For Missing, we hired 2 movie producers and a director. They took care of everything from crew to equipment, and the plunger, too. We took over after the last day of shooting and managed post-production ourselves. His second tip: fit everything in a standard script format. It's already hard to get a video game production team to read a design document, so imagine a film crew. You have to fit every important element into the script. Because we also had to shoot the gameplay part, it was challenging to communicate these elements in the script. My solution was to create a character named the player. The player was doing actions during gameplay scenes and had a point of view to describe the shots and what elements needed to be in frame. In the end, the script is pretty much the only input the producers use to break down a production budget and schedule. Third tip, trust your director. He knows how to direct actors and knows about camera angles and transition. The only thing I had to do is to remind the director of certain transitions between video and gameplay scenes that were not easy to grasp. Tip number 4, be prepared to cut. This is more of a warning than a tip. If you're on a tight budget and cannot afford to extend the production schedule, be prepared to cut out footage. Your schedule will run late and you may have to cut scenes. This was a double problem for us because some video scenes were tightly linked to gameplay scenes. So I had to be very well prepared and ultra aware of any changes/cuts made on set to make sure it wouldn't screw up the game itself.
This brings us to dealing with actors, the joy of it. Now, for many games, of course, they do use voice talent, and that is dealing with an actor, which is what you were pointing out as well as when you're doing mocap. You know, you are actually physically engaging an actor in a set of the time until it got replaced virtually. But when you're stepping over to that on-camera, you know, a lot of things do change. From the standpoint of here in the U.S., we have to deal with SAG-AFTRA. Here, UK is a little different on that, so is Canada. But in SAG-AFTRA, there is some really challenges with at least signing union talent. I've actually been dealing with SAG-AFTRA for almost 3 years now, and they do not have a contract for transmedia. And their video game contract is really old, and yes, it's been in kind of toggle form right now as they've been fighting for more on the voiceover side, but it's built for console development, and trying to say an indie game is the same as a console development is like saying you have a Hollywood movie that's the same as an indie movie. They do not mash in terms of budget, in terms of style. So trying to get that help, because you know I have actually some award-winning actors, Emmy-winning actors who want to join my cast. They really like. Actors in general really like something new and different, which is, I think you're going to point this out in a second. The reason I get them is because they really want something new and different to be a part of, and it's a story-driven, and most of the actors are actually British, and since this is set in Britain, you know, they're just really thrilled. But that side of things is still, frankly, honestly, a struggle, and being able to also mix union, non-union talent. Underneath the new media contract, you can do that. Underneath the video game contract, you cannot. Well, that means then I can't use any actor in Russia or France or whatever who's not with SAG-AFTRA and put them in the game. Because now suddenly they're in conflict underneath SAG-AFTRA's video game contract. So this is an area that I know is going to have to be addressed in the future as we continue to develop, hopefully as we produce products that audience really dovetails to, and we continue to see that merge in media. Well, the union's got to catch up. And meanwhile, I'm sure that there's going to be other producers encountering exactly what I have. So the only real issue that you can get away with, for those of you who are more on the production side, is there is an option in FICOR, in SAG-AFTRA called FICOR, which is short for financial core. And very few actors know of it because the union really does downplay it because they're very scared of it, but it basically allows an actor, they can no longer vote, but they have the ability to do both union and non-union work. And one of the most profile actors is John Voight. John Voight actually became FICOR just so he could do more indie work and do more crossover pieces. So that's kind of the only quasi piece right there, but outside of dealing with the more business side of things, with the actors themselves, you know, they definitely like to have their food. Craft services, you keep them happy there. They eat on long film dates, which is definitely a lot of get up, ready, sit around, wait for your scene, and so you eat while you do it, and then, you know, just that sense of friendly flow. I mean, when I hired, I did not hire just for acting. I actually hired because, first off, we are serious, and I knew I'd be working with them for quite a few years, and I wanted to have a quality relationship. Secondly, it had to do with you want to have people you can have fun with. At the end of the day, just like any team, you want to gel and you want to experience that flow. And most of their favorite memories when I asked them was always shooting days and just the crazy stuff we would goof off on and deal with. Sam, what are your thoughts on dealing with actors?
I mean, I second the comments on food, I think, especially when I've worked with larger casts, if the catering has to be the number one priority in terms of organisation. And as well, to your point of the kind of financial side, my experience, the second you're talking to an agent and they hear that it's a video game, in their head they hear like Call of Duty and they get very excited. And then you try and explain the scale of what you're doing and it gets more complicated. But like I say, I think fundamentally, outside of their agents, like all actors want to do is do awesome work and do exciting work. And there's certainly I've seen over the last few years, going from like 10 years ago when I was working on games and you'd be doing voice acting, and it was usually you would go to actors that would do kind of voiceover for cartoons and stuff, and it was very much that kind of cottage industry. To now, where actually serious actors are looking at video games as just one option amongst TV, movies, and in the way in which serious actors have moved from doing big film productions into TV as well, with the kind of rise of kind of serious cable TV and things. I think you're seeing now that actors understand that they have all these different options, and really all that matters is the character they're playing, the story that they're in, and as well, like you say, that relationship that you have. I mean, with Viva on her story, I was very lucky that prior to her story, I'd worked on this big production for 3 years, and we did a year's worth of shooting. Shot several hours of footage, and one of the actors that we cast for that was Viva. So the publisher paid lots of money for us to do an extensive casting session in London. That's how I met Viva. Worked with her for a year, and again, like you say, part of it is the ability to act and knowing how Viva could add nuance to the performance, but the other half is knowing, for her story, we were sat in this basement for a week, and we had to shoot everything in that week, and it was incredibly intense. And you can have the world's best actor, but if they crack under the pressure or aren't able to handle that kind of environment, then it becomes problematic. So the relationship I had with Viva was fantastic, and I knew that she would really kind of push herself and take this so seriously.
Very good insights. And Simon, his thoughts.
He says, casting the right actors for your game is as important as developing your top gameplay mechanics. It can make or break the game. Patrick Haven is a local rising star. The funny thing is that his agent refused to look at the project at first, but because he's a friend of our director, Tristan Dubois, we were able to show him a prototype. He was convinced right away and said yes. Roy Dupois is a very experienced actor and one of the legends of the French-Canadian film industry. For the outside world, he is known for his lead role in the 90s TV series Nikita. We had the opportunity to pitch him the concept. He loved it. In fact, we found out he's a big fan of the Myst franchise and was surprised to know a game like ours hadn't been made before. He said yes, if the script was good. His character will really take shape as he will lead the investigation in the later episodes. The biggest challenge was to manage a double shooting. Because we are from the French province of Canada, we needed to shoot in both French and English. The actors had to be bilingual. Double shooting is not fun and I wouldn't recommend it. For the rest, it was pretty much business as usual for the actors and crew. The game part had a very little impact on their role. On the union side, we were lucky to be able to avoid these costs. In Canada, because we have a small population split in the 2 official languages, the TV and film industry is heavily subsidized by the government. The argument was simple for us: no subsidy, no union.
And this brings us to handling large video files. So understandably, when you're suddenly bringing in video, that's actually one of our big challenges, because when you've got, all 3 of our titles have mobile outlets. Mine is also Facebook as well, because that's where I knew I could find a lot of my particular audience needs. But still, you had to handle that, and you got to stream the files. So there's no way someone's going to sit there and want to download it, especially on the Facebook side of things. So we each had to struggle with that, and we each solved it in our own ways. But some of the pertinent points are, I mean, even though I highly compressed mine, you're still dealing with, you're dealing gigabytes and megabytes all up in the high numbers. There's just no way. You got 800 minimum. When you have 55 minutes. And then on top of it, I, of course, have audio scenes. And this all just lays it on fast and hard. Hopefully in the future, one thing I was very surprised at with Apple is they have Apple TV. They're all pushing Apple games. And you're sitting there as producers going, you have limits on your files? Apple TV? It makes no sense. I mean, if you're already handing video already, which the TV does on that side, going over here to the game producers saying, no, sorry, you have file limitations? Apple, you need to address this so that, that can be handled conducively. So from the standpoint of our needs, it was always, where's it being distributed? What can I get away with in terms of compression rate so that the audience still has the best experience possible, but also at the same time, we can handle these files in a condensed way. What are some of your thoughts?
So I think I I managed to be a bit blasé about it going into it, because coming from the traditional game side and looking at, say, distributing on Steam, obviously like, your hardcore gamer is downloading games that are now tens of gigs. So on that side as well, I knew that it was a problem with phones and with the iPad. And at that point, there had been a couple of titles that had been like 2 gigs. So again, because naively at that point, I was thinking this wasn't going to sell to a huge number of people. I was assuming that the small number of people that would want to play this would be happy to kind of use up all their phone memory. And like I say, the interesting challenge I had was with the compression was this issue of this authentically crappy, noisy-looking VHS video just wouldn't compress nicely. So it kind of worked out for me. I think I couldn't go beyond what I did. I think it's 1.5 gigs, the Apple version. I think pushing beyond that would be problematic. So for my next series of projects, I've been looking a lot at streaming and figuring out ways of doing that and kind of engaging with kind of high-quality streaming video.
Yep, proactive, as we always have to be in many ways. What are some of Simon's thoughts there, please?
He says, the video file size was a big problem from the beginning, especially on mobile. This is probably the main reason we went episodic. We didn't want to compromise on video quality, so we had to adapt on the side of the game structure. Memory was also a big problem. Each game scene is unique and needs multiple high-res graphic assets to take a lot of space. Adding to the fact that we wanted to have seamless transitions with no loading, it was quite a challenge. In the end, we made our own video player plugin in Unity and were able to make Missing run on old tablets. The game has about 12 minutes of video and feature little dialogue. This was not a choice based on technical constraints, but really a creative choice. I wanted to make the experience feel real-time and keep the flow going. If the cinematic are too long and you do a good job, the gameplay parts will feel like an interruption. On the contrary, if the cinematic is too sparse, they will feel like a reward and not really part of a uniform experience. The downside of this approach is that you need lots of puzzles to compensate for the lack of time leaning back watching videos.
So we're going to wrap with our last thoughts before the Q&A, and that is, how does this affect marketing? So now we have actors. That suddenly does add in a different play. We've seen how, of course, with voiceover actors, they have really kind of carved out a niche for themselves in terms of being able to engage with fans, being able to add that sense of extra dimension to some of these larger profile games. So from the standpoint of some of the indie games, I've really sought to leverage it and seen real benefits of having things like real-world prizes, like an actor in the series will call you if you reach certain elements, or people have the ability to win tickets to Heritage Square Museum in Los Angeles. And any of these type of fun, enhanced ways of telling a story, I as producer love it because I'm like creator, hey, let's have fun together. I don't care if it's a live event or not. But I have definitely seen the advantage in terms of people themselves going, this gives me an extra incentive, or I really like the idea of that sense of personalized touch, or winning that stock certificate, etc. That's an actually mailed to me piece. And so another facet that I've really seen work has been the drip emails. And the drip emails, I always make them stories. So I have things that are really quirky because I have a very quirky cast, like Dr. Death, who collects body parts. So I'll send out something like, Dr. Death's just collected a new monkey tail. That gets opened at extreme rates. So does things like Lord Clayrith just submitted a proposal to tax seamen in Parliament. And that's probably been my #1 opened, as well as my #1 people getting mad at me because they think that a couple of them thought it was for real. Just like, no, that's just my really bad sense of humor. So that sense of story and that sense of play and playing off the actors and or leveraging that, I have found really good fun with. What are your thoughts on marketing with actors?
I think when I set out to do her story, and a lot of it was a risk, especially coming from traditional video games, but the one thing that I was fairly confident was, if you look at the way in which people buy video games, the vast majority of them are bought at the storefront level. So as much as you get good press and people read about it and see it in magazines or what have you, so much of people actually buying your game comes from, in my case, seeing it on the App Store, seeing it on Steam. And the experience of that storefront is just this big row of icons and box art. And there are standards there. There'll be the kind of pixel art, there'll be some kind of beautiful picture of a space marine shooting aliens or something. And so part of my confidence was that if I actually have a photo of Eva, and if in the trailer you have video footage of this woman speaking to the police, that will stand out, that will punch and connect with people because it's a real person in a way that all these kind of artwork and sprites and things won't. And then, having now brought the game out, it is a very different experience. Obviously, if you have a character in a traditional video game that's CGI, you can't have that character come to shows with you. You can't have people talk to them. The press can't talk to that character. Whereas, they're so much more used to speaking to actors, and if the actor is the face of this character, then that gives you a much greater reach with the press in terms of talking about your product. So that's been a big kind of exciting thing.
Very good points. And Simon's thoughts on this matter?
He says, "We did a launch event in Montreal with our 2 actors. It got us a lot of attention with the local press, and it helped us reach the #1 paid app position in Canada in 2 days. We also went to MIP TV in Cairns last April, where we did a presentation of Missing in front of a room full of producers. Walking down the red carpet with our actor at the main event in front of the media and all the photographs was quite an experience. MIP TV did not translate into sales, but it did offer us good business opportunities. We are now in talk with Hollywood producers to develop other series. My advice on actors and social media is to be cautious. If you are selling the game, i.e. not free to play, the actors' followers will not necessarily convert into payers. TV is still a medium that feels free for most consumers. Getting them to pay for something they usually have for free is a hard sell. For me, as a long-time cord cutter, it makes sense to pay per title I want to watch, but it's not the case for the majority of the population quite yet."
And this brings us to our Q&A. So, we have been asked to please tell people there's a mic, and yes, you actually have to speak in it because things are being recorded. But if you have any thoughts, observations, or insights, that you would like to share, now is the time.
Hello. I've got a question for Simon. I'm just kidding. Are you surprised that more TV shows, more movies aren't just spending a little bit of extra budget to shoot more material to create these FMV game spin-offs while they're in production?
There's been examples of this. There was one of the kind of more notable, there was a whole generation in the 90s when we had the CD-ROM of games using video, and a lot of them weren't great. There was an X-Files one that actually used the main series cast, and that kind of really stood out in terms of you actually had the actors and the characters of a certain quality level, and it was very interesting as an approach. I think there's still this big disconnect, I think Simon was speaking to, between the TV production and the games world. But that said, the last 6 months since Her Story came out, I have had so many meetings with TV companies and film companies and book publishers and just the world at large, because all these industries, traditional linear industries, know that the writing's on the wall. They know that, you look at the way that Amazon and Netflix have completely redefined TV development. They know that everything is shifting to this world, and they know that interactivity is a huge part of it. If you look at the audience that's growing up now that is watching their shows on Netflix, if I watch my kids, it's horrendous to me, but they'll load up a series on Netflix and they'll just randomly jump between episodes and they'll have their favorite episode and they'll just skip around it, and I'm there going, you haven't seen episode 3 yet, you can't watch episode 5. And so this audience is consuming their kind of linear content in this way that is much more interactive, and that's going to continue to go somewhere. So all these companies come to me and want to do things and figure out angles. So I think it's starting to happen now. Obviously, these traditional industries move very slowly.
Yes.
But yeah, I've just, it was announced on Tuesday, started in a new role, and my first project there is I'm directing a reboot of the movie War Games, the kind of 80s movie with Matthew Broderick, which is in partnership with MGM. So I can imagine, you can see a lot more things like that happening where we do kind of come together. And it's been unique for me because I've been in the games industry trying to push towards the kind of depth of narrative and kind of an emotional response you have in these kind of traditional media. They're sort of coming towards. So we are now starting to kind of integrate and kind of work together.
And more along that line is agreed that there still is a shift, but it's taking, especially in Hollywood, they don't like taking risks. I'll tell you that. They want to see another success, and then they'll be happy to mimic you. But example would be, I was talking with Dr. Lars Butler, who's one of the producers, executive producers of the Sci-Fi's Defiance Project. And the things he was telling me about that he had to pull to try to get it to be a full transmedia and get that video game made within the show concept, very, very difficult at that time. And now, granted, Sci-Fi has now seen the success, and they're much more willing. In fact, they've got a bunch lined up now that are transmedia with a fuller integration of video games. So I think, again, we're here today, and the reason they kind of approved our panel is because they're seeing the trends. We are seeing trends. We are on the indie side, but we are hoping, as Sam is now leveraging that, to go, hey, big people up on the top, we're here to help you to execute in a larger dimension the way we can do greater storytelling cross media. Thanks. You.
Hi, thank you for the talk. Really enjoyed Her Story, probably one of my favorite games of last year. How do you, as a talk about, this talk has been about like integrating full motion video and the kind of technical and production difficulties with that, but from a design standpoint, how do you balance between watching video, which is this kind of very like passive experience that players don't really like, versus actual gameplay?
One of the things that I discovered with Her Story was, and I think when I first pitched people the idea, they had in their heads that they were going to sit and watch this woman talk for 5 minutes and then type something and then sit for another 5 minutes. But actually what you find in Her Story is, and partly it came out of an accidentally I discovered this by looking at real life police interviews and seeing just how terse and evasive people are. You know, they don't stop and speak monologues for 10 minutes. They're very terse and evasive in the way they speak. So in Her Story, most of the clips are only a few seconds long. Some of them are 10 seconds. There's a few that are like 1 or 2 minutes. But in general, they're very short. So what you actually have is this experience of the kind of back and forth you have in this kind of quasi-dialogue with the woman is very interactive. It feels like you're really kind of getting hands-on. You the time between putting your hands typing something, taking your hands off the keyboard is very short. And then whilst you're watching the clips, the layered gameplay in Her Story is such that even when you're watching a clip, you're thinking, so if you haven't played Her Story, one of the premises in Her Story is that you see all these clips and it's a woman answering the questions the police are asking her. But you never actually hear the questions they're asking. So as you're watching a clip, part of your brain is thinking, what is the question that's being asked? It's like a kind of episode of Jeopardy or something. Also, you have the subtext. So she's being interviewed by the police, she's being evasive, she doesn't want to tell the truth. So you're thinking, this is what she's saying, but what is the subtext of what's really going on? Then you have the clips are disordered. They're out of order. You're going to come to them not in a kind of linear string. It's kind of like a video jigsaw. So as you're watching a clip, you're also trying to piece it together with clips you've seen before. You're bouncing off things. Suddenly you're thinking about this clip in the context of what you've heard now. You're filling in the gaps. So there's huge amounts of kind of mental effort that's going on, and you're thinking of what's the next word I'm going to type. And that's one of the fun things when people play it together or play it as a family. Someone will sit and they'll have the job of writing words down, and other people will be shouting ideas out.
Or Googling for the list.
So there's in terms of a design thing, there's two key things there. One is that actually the frequency of your interaction is quite high. In fact, in some ways, it's higher than it would be in a more conventional action game. You could play a conventional action game and you're pushing your character down a corridor and you're not having to actually think about anything other than pushing your character for like minutes. Whereas here in Her Story, you have this frequency of interaction, but you also have so many layers of like cognitive challenge, things that your brain is crunching over whilst you're watching this video, that it creates a very involving experience.
Right, agreed. And you did play the game, correct?
Yes.
You played through Her Story. So from the standpoint of always that balance, as any producer creator will tell you, when we're mixing a video, we didn't always do it randomly. It had to fit to that character arc, or it had to fit that level play, or it has to fit that particular need. And while we might be gravitating more towards video because we really see the strengths of it, it had to fit our stories. So I'm not here to bash traditional gameplay. We play enough traditional games, we love it. It's just a different style for a different way and a different, and dependent on the needs of that particular project, it's gonna shift. So the way he cut his video is different than the way I cut my video. But then I'm involving you, which means you're gonna get a lot more character interaction with longer clips than the needs that were built for his. So it truly just came down to, what is the story? What does it need?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi there. My name's Karen, and I'm a mom that brought her 2 sons to the gaming expo.
Yay,
and
Mom! So game!
saw this panel because I have a background in television, and I was thinking, well, what is all this? So I'm here. And my mind is now inspired and just swimming with questions for you guys. I could say, come to Texas. You won't have to deal so much with the issue of unions. We're a non-union state, so just...
There you go.
Plug there. But on that front, you know, as you're looking to get these going, and it is very indie, what has been your success with finding funding for some of what you're doing? I'd love to hear a little bit about the success story on that side.
Mm-hmm.
And I've also been inspired with this big South by with the whole world of VR. And can you express your integration potentially to the VR world? Or any conversations that are going on with that. So, too.
Simon's, I'm actually going to answer for Simon, because even though he's not here. The way he got the majority of his funding, as far as he's expressed to me, has been partly of it was government, but the other part of it was individual investment. I do not know how many layers he actually went through, so you are welcome to email him and ask him that. He should be able to get back to you on that. In terms of my gaming, okay, first off, the world of romance, when you're looking at as the industry, is prominently women. And women, women may get mad at me about this, but in general, they're risk adverse, and you definitely see that there. So I kind of stand out as the one who's willing to try really new things. But most of them, it's the guys actually who've supported me. The guys are like, I love what you're doing. I want to do more, or I want to be investment, or I want to take the time to be involved in that. And shockingly, from the audience side too, it's been the guys. I have a 22% male audience in that game. I was not expecting that. And when you go to the videos, I have more men watching at 54% than I do women. I was not expecting that either, but they really liked my world and the character cast. So it became more of a date night feature, which I wasn't expecting. So from a funding angle, there still are some problems, especially on transmedia. There is no one single transmedia source. From a global angle, Canada is actually the best, but you'd have to partner with a Canadian producer to apply for any of the grants that they have there. UK does now offer some more, but again, you have to partner with someone from that specific country to apply for funds. US really has nothing going on right now. In Houston, I'm actually working to develop a new transmedia studio because my husband's actually professor of digital media at the University of Houston. We moved from California 3 years ago. But however, SAG-AFTRA does still control actors. It's not like that as much as I wish it was. But there is more there that I'm doing, though, with serious gaming. I'm getting asked for a lot of serious games, which I'm calling now reality simulation games, because I'm working on a simulation game engine, which actually fits even better than the Puzzler, and mixing in, like for this documentary that's going on PBS, putting in a whole nother reality real people videos that are unlocked in the gameplay. Well, there's nothing that says you can't do that. So I'll just make up a new genre, reality simulation games, you know? And so this now adds a new connection. It dovetails into that particular piece. You have a greater sense of marketing potential, also because the schools now want it, etc. So there is still real blend going on that I'm seeing financially between either angel investment / friends, and/or specific marketing partnerships and/or distribution partnerships. As to specific categories inside the stores themselves, there is no such thing as a transmedia category. Frankly, Amazon would be the pivotal one, because Amazon's the only one where you have your video games and you have books and you have this. You can put everything there. Unfortunately, they're very siloed, and I've spent almost 4 years trying to get them to create a new zone, working with other transmedia producers, and as of yet, they're just not ready for that. But in terms of video games, they do have their new options there that allow you to test out with Amazon Underground and actually see a lot of feedback right away from audience in terms of how long or how they vest, which is a little different than Apple. Apple, you happen to get featured, but that's not always the easiest thing. And again, it's unless you know someone in Apple, etc., and most developers will tell you this, you don't get seen. You have to pay. They stab you in the back. They say, here's a platform, great, but you're not going to be seen unless you pay. And that's just the reality. So that's pretty much every single one of them. Same with Facebook. I mean, you're there, but I have to pay to be seen to get on that storefront. Same with any of these. So each of these, if you happen to get featured, etc., that adds as your marketing dollars, so to speak, and that's what you also strive to do beyond that. And then some of the other deals I have worked so many deals on this, I cannot tell you. As an indie, you are working deals left and right. So I've actually brought in sponsors, and I have a whole bunch more sponsors actually interested in some of my other projects, primarily not because it's a video game, but because I'm doing transmedia, and they go, oh, you're going to be on TV here, and you're doing this here, and you're here. Okay, my advertising, quote-unquote, dollars as sponsors go a lot further. So you're constantly spreading then across that arc. Even if your driving platform happens to be a video game, you have, from a business angle, you're wrapping that game with as many layers as possible to see that it can succeed within whatever the story world is.
What's kind of interesting in the advertisement of a new Blizzard IP, Overwatch, is that even though it's a multiplayer shooter game, they're doing a lot of different advertising for it in different platforms. Like, if you've watched The Force Awakens, which pretty much everyone has, they had it so that a theatrical teaser for the game was set before the movie, which is really different. There was the Warcraft movie trailer, but then they also had the Overwatch teaser, which was strange because usually you don't have video game related trailers before a extremely huge budget movie. So I just find it kind of interesting. They're even doing advertisements on some TV now. So it's almost that different sense of blending in movies and TV with video games in that sense.
And Sam, what are your thoughts on funding and marketing?
Yeah, so when I started on her story, I definitely fell between two stools. So the concept, as I could pitch it without anything to show, because it wasn't done yet, was not something I could get video game funding for. And a lot of the kind of outside investment for video games comes from people who look at things like Clash of Clans and they think, I'm going to give you X $million and I'll walk away with $100 million. So if you're there going, I'm making this indie thing and I think there's a good chance that you'll get your money back, they're not interested. I looked into a lot of kind of film stuff and creative arts funds in the UK and didn't get any of those. Again, the big thing I was up against there was I was distributing my game digitally, and all of their concepts and checks were, if it's like the more artistic funds, where will you be exhibiting? How many tickets will you be selling? Or you know, where are you going to be showing your film when it's finished? And it was like, well, I'm just going to be releasing this on this digital store, and that just was something they don't really have their heads around.
Yeah, agreed.
There are now, from the video side in the UK, a lot more investment opportunities. We've got like tax breaks now, which was mainly brought about because we're feeling the burn from Canada, where everyone has moved to Canada because they have all these wonderful tax things for video games. And there are some kind of smaller funds. What I found in the end was, so I funded it mostly through myself, and then at the end there was a games fund called the Indie Fund, which is a bunch of independent game developers who've done very well, and they kind of reinvest. And they have some good rates where they'll give you an amount of money and you owe them nothing, but you pay everything back and lots.
Right.
So it's like a very good option. Feels like you get a lot of security with it.
And you actually worked a deal with the actress for points, you said.
Yeah, I mean that's again. So having worked with her on this big budget game, the conversation with her agent was we're not going to be able to pay those rates. But it was important to me, and I tell this to a lot of independent game developers. If you're going to be working with talent, then you have to pay them. Like, whether that's a huge amount of money, you still have to pay them. And I was very happy to give Viva points, and now that's worked out very well for her. So that's a good way of doing things. But I think there's an interesting future in this kind of medium where you're looking at traditional advertising is really suffering now, because everyone's attention is so divided and so spread around. And when you talk about interactive media, suddenly people get very interested because you have proof that you have an engaged audience member.
Yes.
Because people are actually touching the screen, they're interacting, they're engaging with it. And that's kind of the space that I'm looking into now, is finding ways to partner up.
Yes.
And yes, you say you have sponsors and things.
Corporate sponsor, they love, well, all they look for is, what are the numbers? Well, that's the one thing video games really excel at. Lots and lots of checklists of what people did, how they did it, and the numbers. No other advertising media can you get that. So there is a huge amount of interest in that. Thank you all for coming. Really appreciate your efforts and coming here and listening to us. Take care.
Thank you.